I remember the first time I walked into St. Patrick's Hospital. It wasn't my choice to be there, but that's a story for another time. My name is Jeff Anderson, and this is a tale I never wanted to tell. But I've lived with it for so long, and it's eating away at me. Maybe if I get it out, I can finally breathe again. It all started on a late, rainy evening. I was admitted to the hospital for a routine procedure. Nothing too serious, just a few tests. At least, that's what I thought. I was assigned to room 308, a quiet, dimly lit space in the older part of the building. The hospital wasn't the newest, but it had a certain charm to it, antique furniture, a smell of old wood mixed with antiseptic. But what stood out to me the most was the eerie silence. It wasn't the normal quiet you get in a hospital where people are resting or recovering. This silence felt different, like it was hiding something. I remember the nurse who checked me in, her name was Caroline. She was a bit odd, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and her hands shook when she adjusted the four. But I brushed it off, assuming it was nothing. After all, she was just a nurse. The room itself seemed normal at first. White walls, a single bed, a small window overlooking the hospital parking lot. But then, I noticed the thing that made my skin crawl, a faded photograph on the wall. It was a picture of the hospital staff from the 1940s. In the photo, there were smiling faces, old-fashioned uniforms, but what I noticed was the man in the corner of the picture. His eyes, those eyes, they were different. Empty, hollow. Almost like he wasn't supposed to be there. I asked Caroline about it, but she quickly brushed it off, saying it was an old photo and nothing to worry about. But something in her voice didn't sit right with me. She was too eager to change the subject. As she left the room, she warned me, almost too seriously, to stay in bed and rest. But as I lay there, something wasn't right. There was a strange buzzing sound, like an electrical hum, coming from the walls. It wasn't the usual noise you'd hear in a hospital. This was off. I tried to ignore it, but as the hours passed, the hum grew louder. More disturbing. It was as if something was trying to break through the walls. I got up to investigate, but the moment I stepped into the hallway, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A shadow, flickering at the end of the corridor. It wasn't the shape of a person, it was something else. Something too tall, too thin, with long, spindly limbs. My heart began to race. I was sure I was seeing things, so I quickly retreated back to my room and locked the door. But that night, the true horror began. The following night, the same buzzing hum returned, but this time it was louder, almost deafening. It rattled the windows and vibrated the bed beneath me. I was wide awake, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling, praying it would stop. But it didn't. It got worse. I could hear footsteps in the hallway now, slow, deliberate steps, the kind of footsteps you would hear in a haunted house, when something isn't quite human. They echoed off the walls, getting closer and closer, but when I looked outside my door, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, save for the pale light flickering above. It was around 3 a.m. when I finally heard something else, something far more disturbing. A whisper. "Help me." The voice was faint, barely audible, but it was there, like it was coming from the walls themselves. The words felt like they were vibrating through my skull. I could feel the cold air creeping under my door, as if the very atmosphere of the hospital was thickening, pressing in on me. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I wasn't alone in that room anymore. There was something with me, something that shouldn't have been there. I decided to get up and check the hallway again, my nerves on edge. This time, I noticed something new. A faint red light was glowing from the far end of the corridor. It wasn't the typical emergency lights, but a deep, unnatural red. It flickered, like it was struggling to stay on. My instincts told me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I stood frozen, watching the light pulse, as if it was calling me, urging me to go closer. So, against all sense, I walked toward it. As I got closer to the source of the light, I realized it was coming from a door, room 312. I had never seen it before. It wasn't marked on the floor plan, and I couldn't find it on the hospital directory. The door was old, warped, and the paint was peeling. The red light seemed to seep through the cracks, casting a sickly glow on the floor. I hesitated, but something inside me, something deep in my gut, told me I needed to see what was behind it. I reached for the handle, and just as my hand touched it, the door creaked open on its own. What I saw in that room. I'll never forget it. The room was identical to mine, except it was wrong. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols that looked like they had been scratched into the walls. The air was thick, suffocating. In the center of the room was an old metal gurney, rusted and stained, with a single figure strapped to it. The figure was impossible. The person's face was contorted in agony, skin stretched tight over their skull. But what was worse was the eyes, those same hollow eyes I'd seen in the photograph earlier. They were wide open, unblinking, staring at me with an intensity that sent waves of terror through my body. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were made of lead, my breath shallow and rapid. And then, I heard that whisper again. "Help me." But this time, the voice was clear, desperate, filled with a deep sorrow. It was as if it came from everywhere at once, inside my head, in the walls, under my feet. It was coming from the very core of the hospital. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't. The door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside the room with the figure. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of footsteps, those same slow, deliberate steps, growing closer and closer. When I woke up, I was back in my room, room 308. The hospital had returned to its eerie silence, as if nothing had happened. But everything was wrong. The bed was too soft, too familiar, and the sheets felt too cold. My heart raced as I tried to sit up, only to find that my hands were trembling uncontrollably. My entire body felt like it had been through a battle, drained and sore. The clock on the wall read 4:17 a.m. It hadn't been that long since I'd last checked the time before I went into that other room. I could still hear that whisper echoing in my mind, a distant plea, but now it seemed to be more of a warning than a cry for help. I was alone in the room. Caroline had come and gone, but there was no sign of her now. The hallway outside was quiet, too quiet. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled into my bones, but it was impossible. The air felt thick, and there was that low, electrical hum again, vibrating through the walls. I wasn't sure if I was still dreaming, or if something far worse had happened while I was unconscious. Had I really seen room 312? Had the figure been real? My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. But there was one thing I knew for certain: I needed to leave. I couldn't stay in this place any longer. It was suffocating, and it wasn't just the physical isolation. I felt like the building itself was alive, like it was watching me. Waiting for something. With every step down the hallway, the air grew colder. My breath fogged in front of me, and the lights flickered above. I reached the elevator, but it wasn't moving. The button didn't light up, no matter how many times I pressed it. That's when I heard the footsteps again, the same slow, deliberate steps from before. Only this time, they were behind me. I spun around, heart in my throat, but there was no one there. The elevator door opened with a soft ding. I stepped inside, my nerves on edge, but as I pressed the button for the ground floor, the elevator didn't move. It stayed stuck between two floors, the lights dimming with each passing second. And then, just as I was about to panic, the voice returned. Clearer this time. Louder. Get out, before it's too late. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. That wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a warning. But who, or what, was speaking? Suddenly, the elevator lurched, and I was thrown against the wall. The lights flickered wildly, and the walls seemed to warp around me. I screamed, trying to pull myself together, but the doors refused to open. It felt like I was trapped inside some kind of nightmare. I could see it now, out of the corner of my eye. The figure, that same distorted, tall shape, its spindly limbs stretching unnaturally as it loomed at the other end of the elevator, just beyond the shadows. The hollow eyes locked onto mine, empty yet full of malice. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. It was coming closer. And then, with a loud bang, the elevator doors finally opened. But when I stepped out, I wasn't on the ground floor. I was back in room 312. The door creaked shut behind me. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had made a terrible mistake. There was no escape. There was only the darkness, and whatever was waiting for me inside this cursed building. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The door to room 312 had closed behind me, and I was standing there, in the very same room I had sworn I'd left. My heart pounded in my chest as I frantically looked around. The markings on the walls, those strange symbols, they were still there, etched into the plaster like some sort of grotesque ritual. But they had changed, twisted, as though the walls themselves were alive, shifting and growing in ways that shouldn't have been possible. My eyes snapped to the bed. The figure that had been strapped to it, the one with the hollow eyes, was gone. But the gurney was still there, stained, as if it had never been moved. There was an overwhelming sense of wrongness in the air, a heavy, suffocating presence that weighed down on me like a physical force. Then I heard it again, the whisper, that bone-chilling voice. But this time, it wasn't just one voice. It was multiple, layered on top of each other, each one more frantic than the last. "Help me. Please help me." I turned around, desperately searching for the source, but there was nothing, no person, no figure, just shadows that seemed to crawl across the floor. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. How was this possible? What the hell was happening to me? The very fabric of this place felt like it was coming apart at the seams. Suddenly, I felt something cold brush against my neck. I whipped around, but again, there was nothing there, just the feeling of a presence, something standing too close, breathing in the darkness. I wasn't alone. Then, I saw it. At first, it was just a flicker, a movement out of the corner of my eye. But when I looked again, I saw it clearly, a figure standing in the far corner of the room. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs long and contorted in unnatural ways, like it was stretching to fit into the space. The thing was hunched, its skeletal body covered in what looked like rotting, decaying flesh. The skin was pulled taut over its bones, its eyes black pits, empty and soulless. And then, it spoke. "You're not leaving." The words weren't just spoken, they reverberated in my skull, vibrating my teeth and rattling my brain. It was like the thing was speaking directly into my mind, its voice so invasive, so deep that it felt like it was tearing my very sanity apart. The air grew heavier, colder, and I could see my breath fogging in front of me. The temperature was plummeting, as though the very soul of the hospital was draining the warmth from the room. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, but when I looked down, I saw that it had vanished. My heart hammered in my chest as panic surged. This wasn't just a nightmare. This was real. The thing in front of me, it was real. And it wasn't alone. I heard something else now, scratching. Quiet at first, but growing louder. It came from the walls, from the floor beneath me. It was like nails on a chalkboard, but deeper, more violent. The scratching turned into pounding, as if something, or someone, was trying to escape from within the very structure of the hospital itself. The figure in the corner tilted its head, the bones in its neck cracking with an audible snap. It took a step forward, and the floor groaned under its weight. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry, choked with fear. And then, in the dim light, I saw it, the face. A pale, gaunt face, pressing against the wall behind the thing. It was so close, its mouth open in a silent scream, its eyes wide and filled with terror. But it wasn't alive. No, it couldn't be. The skin was pulled tight, as if it had been stuck in that position for years, maybe decades. The eyes stared right at me, pleading, as if begging me to understand. And then the thing in the corner spoke again, its voice now a guttural rasp, dragging its words through the thick, oppressive air. You should have never come back. I turned to run, my legs moving on instinct, but the door to room 312 slammed shut. I pounded on the door, screaming, trying to claw my way out. But it wouldn't open. I was trapped, locked in with the thing that shouldn't exist. I could feel it, its presence closing in on me, suffocating me. The walls were closing in, the scratching, the pounding, growing louder, surrounding me from all directions. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard another voice. This one wasn't from the thing in the corner, nor from the walls. This voice was clearer, closer. A nurse. Jeff, wake up. My eyes snapped open. I was back in my bed, in room 308. But the room was different now. The walls were pristine, the bed untouched. There was no sign of the marks, no sign of the thing. Caroline was standing by my bedside, her face calm, almost serene. Everything's fine, she said, her smile stretching just a bit too wide. You just had a bad dream. I stared at her, my heart racing, but something about her smile, it didn't feel right. Her eyes were too cold, too empty. And I realized then, I wasn't alone in this hospital anymore. I was never going to leave. I couldn't bring myself to trust her. Caroline's smile, that fake, too wide grin, it was all wrong. There was something in her eyes, something empty, like she was hiding a truth I wasn't meant to see. The coldness in her voice made my stomach churn. Bad dream, she repeated, though there was no warmth in her words. You just need to rest. I nodded numbly, unsure if I was even still in the real world. But deep down, I knew. I knew what was happening. This wasn't just a dream. It was real. The hospital, that thing, the whispers, it was all happening again. There was no escape. Not from this place. Not from whatever was haunting me. As I lay there, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, I realized something else. The hospital had been built on top of something ancient. Something that had been buried deep in the earth, something that should never have been disturbed. And I had walked right into it. I hadn't just walked into the hospital, I had walked into a trap. The thing in room 312, the strange figure in the shadows, was no coincidence. It wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was the spirit of someone, or something, that had been trapped here, feeding on the souls of the people who entered. The hospital had been constructed around it, a shell of modernity hiding the horror beneath. The walls had absorbed the suffering, the fear, over the years. And now, it was coming for me. It wanted me. I tried to sit up again, but my legs were weak, my body trembling. My mind was clouded. Caroline was still there, watching me, her gaze never wavering. She didn't blink. It was as if she was waiting for something, waiting for me to understand. You've seen it, haven't you? I whispered, my voice hoarse. Her smile faltered for a moment, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. That brief hesitation was all I needed to know I was right. You're trapped, she said, her voice now colder, more distant. Just like the others. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The others. The people who had come before me, the ones who had vanished without a trace, the ones who were never found. They hadn't left. They were here, too. Trapped in the walls, in the shadows, feeding the thing that haunted this place. I need to get out of here, I gasped, my chest tightening. I could feel the walls pressing in, the air thickening, suffocating me. Caroline stepped closer, her face now inches from mine. I could smell her breath, cold, unnatural, like something decayed. She leaned in, whispering softly in my ear, "You can't leave, Jeff. You never will." Suddenly, the world around me began to warp again, the walls shifting, expanding and contracting like the building itself was alive. I looked around frantically, trying to make sense of what was happening, but the room was changing. The bed was gone. The windows had disappeared. Everything was spinning, twisting, distorting into a maddening blur. And then, the voice came again. The thing's voice. "She's mine now. And so are you." I turned to see the figure from before, standing just behind Caroline. It had grown, towering over her, its limbs longer, more grotesque. Its hollow eyes locked onto mine, full of malice. Caroline's smile faded completely, her face now an expressionless mask, her body stiffening as if she was no longer in control. She wasn't Caroline anymore. She was part of it. A puppet. The thing stepped forward, its limbs twisting unnaturally, bones cracking with every movement. Its breath was ragged, like the sound of something dying. I could feel the cold emanating from it, the chill seeping into my very bones. "You should have stayed in your room," it hissed. "You've already seen too much." I backed away, my legs shaking uncontrollably. My thoughts were a jumble, but I knew one thing: I had to escape. I had to. There was no more time for fear, no more time to question whether this was real. It was real. And if I didn't run, I would be swallowed by whatever this thing was, consumed by the very hospital that had taken so many before me. With one last burst of adrenaline, I bolted for the door. It didn't open. I tried again. Nothing. I pounded on the door, screaming for help. But there was no help coming. I was alone, and I knew it. Then I remembered the emergency exit, the one that had been marked in the hallway on the floor plan. If I could reach it, maybe, just maybe, I could get out. I ran, my heart pounding in my chest, the thing's footsteps thundering behind me. It was chasing me. I could hear it breathing, feel its presence closing in. I had no choice but to run faster, but the hallways seemed to stretch, to grow longer, as if the building itself was shifting, playing tricks on me. Finally, I reached the exit door. I threw myself at it, my hands shaking as I tried to force it open. It wouldn't budge. And then I realized, the door wasn't locked. It was sealed from the other side. There was no escaping. I turned around, and the last thing I saw before everything went black was the thing's twisted face, its eyes full of hunger. There was no escape. I was already part of the hospital's dark history, just another soul lost in its depths. I woke up to darkness, but not the comforting kind. It was the kind of darkness that pressed in on you, heavy and suffocating. My body ached like I had been dragged through a nightmare, my limbs sore, my chest tight. I could feel the cold, icy air surrounding me, but I was no longer in room 308. The smell of antiseptic, the stale hospital air, it was gone. The hospital was gone. At first, I thought I was dead. But then, I heard it. That faint, metallic buzzing sound again, distant but unmistakable. It sent chills crawling up my spine, like I was being drawn back into the nightmare I had hoped to escape. I tried to move, but my body refused to cooperate, my limbs still heavy as if I was trapped in some kind of limbo. My vision slowly adjusted to the dark, and I saw it, just beyond my outstretched hand. A small, faint sliver of light. It flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. I staggered forward, the darkness pressing against me with every step, pushing me back, but I forced myself forward, desperate to find a way out. The buzzing grew louder, sharper. As I stumbled into the light, I realized I was no longer in the hallway. I was in the basement. It was a stark, concrete room, the air thick with mold and decay. The walls were lined with old medical equipment, machines I had never seen before, wires hanging loose, covered in a strange, almost black residue. There were no windows, no exits. Just the oppressive, endless darkness that seemed to pulse with the hum of electricity. And then, I saw something that made my stomach turn. There, in the center of the room, was a large metal door. It was rusted and corroded, the paint peeling off in patches. But more importantly, it was marked. Symbols carved deep into the surface, ancient, familiar symbols. They looked like the same ones I had seen in room 312. But now, they seemed to glow faintly, like they were alive. I knew what I had to do. I had to open the door. Whatever was behind it was the key to ending this madness. To ending the cycle. But as I approached, I heard a low, guttural growl from the shadows. My heart stopped. I wasn't alone. From the corner of my eye, I saw it, the thing, its twisted, long limbs stretching toward me. Its hollow eyes stared out from the shadows, just like the ones I had seen in the photo, just like the ones in the walls. It was there. Watching me. The door. I had to reach the door. I sprinted, my legs weak but my will stronger than the fear clawing at my chest. I reached for the handle, my fingers slick with sweat, but as soon as I touched it, I felt the thing's cold presence behind me, its breath on my neck. "Don't open it," it whispered, its voice like the creaking of old wood. "You don't know what's inside." But I didn't care. I turned the handle with every ounce of strength I had, and the door groaned open, revealing the darkness behind it. A tunnel. The hallway was narrow, long, stretching into the abyss. The walls were covered with the same symbols, pulsating with an unnatural light, as if the tunnel itself was alive. But this wasn't just a tunnel, it was a gateway. A gateway to something worse than death. I hesitated for a moment. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but I knew there was no turning back now. If I didn't go, if I didn't find the answers, I would never escape. The cycle would continue. With one last deep breath, I stepped into the tunnel. The moment I did, I felt it. A wave of darkness, suffocating, crushing, consuming. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, like it was made of pure fear. The walls seemed to close in around me, the symbols on them shifting, twisting, changing. And then, in the distance, I saw something, a light. A faint glow at the far end of the tunnel. I pushed myself forward, my legs burning with exhaustion, my mind screaming at me to stop. But I had to reach the light. It was the only way out. As I neared the end, I saw the light clearer. It was coming from a doorway, just like the one I had opened, but this one was different. This one wasn't a door, it was an entrance. The door was open. The light was brighter now, blindingly so. But as I crossed the threshold, I felt it, something was wrong. I stopped in my tracks, frozen in terror, as I realized where the light was coming from. It was a hospital room. My hospital room. St. Patrick's Hospital. Room 308. I was back. I hadn't left. The thing was right. The door was never an exit. It was a trap. I turned around, panic flooding my veins, but the tunnel had disappeared. There was no way back. No way out. And then, I heard it. That voice. The same whisper, the same growl. "You're home now, Jeff. You'll never leave." The door to room 308 slammed shut behind me. The light flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I was trapped. Again. There was no more time. I could feel the walls pressing in, the air thinning, the very ground beneath me trembling with something ancient, something hungry. I was back in room 308, except this time, it wasn't the same. It felt wrong in a way I couldn't describe, like the air was thick with unseen eyes, waiting for me to break. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking, my body drenched in cold sweat. I knew what was happening, but I refused to accept it. It couldn't be. This wasn't happening. But it was. The shadows around me seemed to stretch, growing darker, deeper, and the faint buzzing hum returned. That damn sound. It had followed me from room 312, through the tunnels, into this place. I could feel it vibrating through my chest, my bones. It was alive. The hospital itself, its very soul, had claimed me. The figure was there again, standing in the corner of the room, its spindly limbs outstretched, its eyes hollow and endless. It had been following me, lurking in the corners of my mind. It was part of the hospital. Part of the darkness. You tried to escape, it whispered, its voice a harsh rasp, but you can't. You belong to it now. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My body was frozen, my mind screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was trapped. I wanted to scream, but the words died in my throat. The figure stepped closer, its presence overwhelming, filling the room with the cold, suffocating pressure. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp teeth, too many to count, and it hissed softly. "You're just another soul to feed the hunger," it said, its voice crawling under my skin. "St. Patrick's Hospital takes everything." I turned away, desperate to find a way out, but the room, the hospital, was shifting again. The walls were closing in. The corners of the room were bending, stretching, warping. There was no escape. There was only the endless darkness that wrapped itself around me. I stumbled, falling to my knees, the weight of the realization crashing over me. This wasn't a nightmare. This wasn't some twisted dream I could wake up from. This was real. And I was just another victim, another lost soul caught in the endless cycle of St. Patrick's Hospital. I had heard the stories, the rumors about the place, but I never believed them. People said the hospital was cursed, that it was built on the ruins of something ancient, something dark. But now I knew. It wasn't just a story. The hospital was alive, feeding off the fear and pain of those who entered. And once you were inside, once it had its claws in you, there was no escape. I glanced around the room, my eyes frantic, my heart racing, looking for any way out. But there was nothing. The door was gone. The window was gone. The walls were smooth, featureless, as though the room had never been there to begin with. I wasn't in a room anymore. I wasn't anywhere. I was trapped in the space between spaces, caught in the soul of the hospital itself. And then, the voice came again. But this time, it wasn't the thing whispering to me. It was the other voices, the voices of the lost souls. The ones that had come before me. "Join us," they said, their voices overlapping, desperate. "We've always been here. We'll always be here." The hospital had taken me. And now, I was part of it. I don't know how long I've been here. Time doesn't exist in this place. It stretches and warps, just like the walls, just like the shadows that move in the corners of my vision. I can feel the hunger. I can feel the darkness, waiting to claim the next soul, and I know, that someone else will walk through those cursed doors, and they'll hear my voice, calling out from the depths of this place, trapped just like I am. St. Patrick's Hospital doesn't let go. It doesn't let you leave. And now, I am its prisoner. Forever.